Welcome to Living Stones University. So glad you decided to join us. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to welcome a few new subscribers. Thank you so much for taking an interest in Living Stones University. We're kind of under construction now, so I'm having to kind of makeshift portable studios wherever I go when it's time to shoot one of these programs. And today we're going to try to wrap up our series on the book of Daniel, where we've been looking at all these prophetic images and just seeing if they're relevant to us today or have they already been fulfilled. But some of you may have noticed I've been monetized, not by my choice. YouTube decided to monetize my channel. I don't know why, but maybe that means more viewers for me. I don't know. I'm not after viewership. Of course, I'd love for people to share these teachings in here. I just want to teach the Word of God and to the best of my abilities, and that's great. It's kind of, it's their platform. They provide a lot of great tools for their creators and things. So hey, I understand YouTube. I have no control over these commercials, though. If I monetize, then I've got a little bit of control. But I don't really want to monetize. I'm not out to try to make money. So, hey, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But now I'm going to put in a little plug real quick before we jump into our lesson today, too. I'm going to do a new series, starting a new series next time. Maybe a week break between these two for me to kind of study up and get caught up on what I'm going to be doing. But the series is going to be on the millennium. The whole series is on the millennium. And looking into all the doctrinal issues with the millennium and, of course, the pre-millennial view. And we'll be critiquing that as we go along. But anyway, I did want to say this. If you watched the Daniel's 70 Weeks Are Determined video, it's just kind of, I wanted to bring out the irony of this dispensational interpretation, which I held for many years. But it's just so ironic that the New Testament, the Old Testament is full of the prophets prophesying of some great day that the Lord promised Abraham. He promised Moses. That I'm going to raise up one like you, Moses, that listened to this prophet. And that's what Moses said, that God told him. The Lord's going to raise up one like me in the future, and Israel needs to listen to this prophet, because that's the Lord Jesus. So the Old Testament is full of all these great prophecies of men when Messiah comes, and he's going to set the people free. The Jewish people will be set free, and not only them, but the Gentiles too. And so the whole Old Testament is prophesying this. There's a few obscure, mysterious prophecies about the second coming, and no one understood. But you've got all these prophecies about the first coming, and then he tells Daniel specifically, hey, all that stuff that's been going on, that the prophets have prophesied about a new covenant and me sending my Messiah, guess what? I'm telling you, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send my Messiah. He's going to usher in a new covenant. We're doing away with the old covenant. And so and if you're dispensational and you're interpreting this vision that Daniel had, then you get down to the most important part where he confirms the covenant because of he with his blood, and you say that's the Antichrist. It's just ironic how that happens. But I shouldn't be laughing because it's extremely serious. It's one thing to misinterpret a scripture and just apply it to something different, but to take what's directly prophesied about Jesus and apply it to Satan, that's, wow. I mean, we should stop and take a step back and make sure we got good reasons to do that. So anyway, if you haven't seen that video, go back and watch it. I think what I'm going to do at the end of this video, on the end screen, I'm going to put some links. I'll put a link to my Revelation series, the whole series. I'll put a link to my eschatology series, and I'm going to put a link to this Daniel series as well. So you can just click on those and you'll have all of those eschatological videos at your fingertips in order. But let's just jump right on into the lesson today and see what we got. Now, we're going to be talking about 10 signs of the Antichrist today and reviewing everything. We started out, if you'll recall, for those of you who have been with us the whole series, we started out with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and I had like 7 signs that I listed to compare. They were just signs that I came up off the top of my head throughout the years. All of us kind of agree, hey, if there's an Antichrist going to manifest today, he's going to look like this. I mean, this is what the Bible typically says that follows the Antichrist. And so I put down those, and today I've added some because as we've gone along, we've added more to those original 7. And look, beloved, there's probably even more than what I'm going to show you today. I mean, I'm also going to talk about 2 others that aren't included in the 10. That's not my point. I'm not trying to get every single sign of the Antichrist listed here, because as I've already discussed in one of these videos, there's no rule of thumb in the scriptures for the Antichrist criteria here. Does he meet, does he have to, the ultimate Antichrist figure we're looking for today, does he have to meet all of those signs or just some of them? I mean, I don't think any of the characters we've looked at or talked about so far possessed all of those signs. Some are attributed to this and some are attributed to that later. And so there's no rule of thumb to go by there, but that's what we're doing. We're looking at these. I spent so much time critiquing the dispensational argument, last week, that we didn't really get to the signs. So we'll talk about those today. And let's just take a look at these 10 signs that I've come up with. Now, I want you to notice over here, I've got the 10 signs over here. And over here, I've got these Antichrist figures we ran across. Let's just kind of go through some of these real briefly. I'm going to kind of get out of your way here. We saw that Nebuchadnezzar fits a Antichrist figure. Some of these applied to him. He demanded people to worship him. Remember, that's when you hear the music, fall down, worship me. He did destroy Jerusalem and the temple of God. That put it into sacrifices. So I don't know about him being very smart and eloquent. Certainly, probably spoke a lot of blasphemous words. There was no false prophet, though. That's what these are here. Note that the signs highlighted in yellow are absent from the text in Daniel. So that doesn't mean that these signs would not accompany an Antichrist figure today. It just means you can't go back to the book of Daniel for your argument as a proof text, because there is no mark of the beast mentioned in any of these kings here that they issued. There's no false prophet. Nebuchadnezzar didn't need a false prophet to get people to worship him. He just demanded it or die. He didn't need a mark or anything. None of them needed a mark. They got worship without all that. So these aren't like mandatory. These have to be, or it's not an Antichrist. Some of these signs follow them. Some of them don't. And so that's kind of what we saw. I've noticed here on the asterisks on ending sacrifice and offerings, where this Antichrist figure I've got down here, changing laws and times, because they go hand in hand. Basically, for us in the new covenant, since there hasn't been sacrifices for over 2,000 years, really what you're talking about, not only against Jews, but really Christians is what we're talking about, the church, is changing laws and times. That's just making it illegal to worship God. They tried to do that with the COVID fiasco, and that's what that is all about. It's trying. You remember one of the earliest Antichrist figures in the Bible is, Pharaoh, when he took Egypt. Remember, as God was showing him all these signs, and he'd kind of let up for a little while, and then he'd harden his heart again. And one of those times he said, okay, I'll let y'all, Moses said, let my people go. We want to go out to the wilderness and we're going to worship God. And one of those times Pharaoh he's okay, go out there, take your little ones, go out there, but you can't take the animals because he knew they would sacrifice them. He didn't want them sacrificing to God. So that just happens. These Antichrist figures try to change times and laws in an attempt to get you to keep from practicing your religion, your Christianity, right? But yeah, we see these signing a peace treaty. Notice I've got this starred down here. These asterisks on these indicates dispensational theology. So that's going to be a huge, how do I put this? A huge disagreement between scholars on how they interpret this. And most are going to say this is a wrong interpretation. The dispensational view is that there's no signing of a peace treaty with Israel in Daniel chapter 9. That's Jesus is making the covenant. I know the same word the word berit is used, I think it's berit, is used for covenant there. That's the typical word for a sacred covenant between God and his people. Now, sometimes it is used for other agreements, but when it is, it's clear in the text. Other subject matter and words around it make it obvious this is a peace treaty. And you'll see sometimes it's even a different word used to translate. I have some questions with the translators, as you saw last week, with Daniel chapter 9, with these capitalizations and things like that. Just question their judgment sometimes. But yeah, and so the 10 horns is the same way. Well, 10 horns is mentioned in there. Yeah, it's mentioned, but it's the preterist view. If we're going to use the preterist view, yeah, we can go ahead and use it because it does apply to those 10 emperors or kings in Rome at that time. Other things don't fit, but and you can see that in my Revelation 17 video and Revelation 13 maybe. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to put all those linked at the end of this program. But we had other figures come out of that as well. We had Antiochus Epiphanes came out of Greece. We had Rome, it was Nero. Titus would be a figure. Many since then have fit this Antichrist figure with many of these signs behind them. And so it's just something that we see. Now, let's continue on and see where this goes. I think this is in order. Who is or what is Antichrist? Let's explain that. Let's see if we can kind of put some clarity to this because there's so much assumption attached to this Antichrist figure. There's a lot of strong evidence for Antichrist figures in the past as being fulfilled. Some we can look at through history and see that there's other Antichrist figures. But notice here, Daniel uses the title Little Horn. So as we're going to see here, it's not always that clear. Antichrist is not something you see popping up in the Bible over and over, everywhere, all through the scriptures. It's just not there, beloved. But notice here, John is the only one who uses the words Antichrist. The Apostle John. He's the only one. Daniel uses the little horn in the Old Testament. The book of Revelation, which John wrote, uses the title beast for this character, if indeed they're the same. Paul uses the title man of sin. He never says anything about a beast or an Antichrist or any of that. So, as you can see here, this figure has been known about for a long time. He's been prophesied about for a long time, but there's this mystery around it that not everybody sees it the same or has it put in a nice little tidy package to where they can all call it the same label, Antichrist. But no, they see it different ways, described in different ways. Note here too in Matthew 24, let me get out of the way here. Matthew 24, Jesus speaks of great tribulation, but he does not mention Antichrist. Right? Read Matthew 24. He never once mentions Antichrist. He does speak of great tribulation. And look, beloved, I just believe Paul, like John, like Jesus, they all spoke to the people as though they would live. The people would live to see what they were talking about. It's all through the book of Revelation. I make that clear in the series on the book of Revelation. Jesus was telling these people here when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, flee quickly. You're probably too late if you waited that long. So he's talking to those people. He said, you're going to see this in your lifetime, some of you. So that's something we need to keep in mind when we're talking about prophecies, in whether they be in the Old Testament, the Gospels, or the book of Revelation. We need to look at these things closely and make sure that these aren't things that are just, I'm sorry, this cut off because on the computer it's not. So, beloved, I'm sorry about that. But so let's just go through some scriptures now. There's only 3 scriptures that talk about Antichrist, that mention Antichrist. So let's just look at them. It's all by the Apostle John. He writes in his first epistle, he says, little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come, by which we know that it is the last hour. Who is a liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? He's Antichrist, who denies the Father and the Son. So we're going to start to see here, Antichrist is given some real specific labels here that may not necessarily be mentioned under the beast or the man of sin or this or that. That doesn't mean they're not connected, but these are very specific things that would accompany an Antichrist. We're going to see that is acknowledging that God became flesh and dwelt among us and died for us and shed his blood for us and rose again. That's the, if you don't believe that, that's the spirit of Antichrist. Look at this next verse. Beloved, don't believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and now already in the world. So here again, notice this. You've heard that the Antichrist is coming. Here you've heard the Antichrist is coming, right? So the people of the early days in Jesus and the early church were aware of this Antichrist figure, and they were being taught to expect some kind of a main Antichrist figure, even though there are, and see again, the capital A, they're putting this as a pronoun to identify a specific a specific Antichrist figure, the ultimate Antichrist figure. And then here, this is small Antichrist, because they're just talking plural, and there's several people. If they don't believe that Jesus come in the flesh, that's all of the spirit of Antichrist. There's a bunch of Antichrists. Again, let's be careful, because capital letters, are not always going to be right. 90% of the time, 95% of the time, I think translators did a great job. But there's a few times where I question their capitalization of letters, as we saw last week. But anyway, yeah, there's a spirit of Antichrist loose today, right? We've learned that, and they were being taught that there's going to be some kind of an Antichrist manifestation in the future. Let's look at this last verse in the Bible where Antichrist is actually mentioned here. The apostle tells us that for many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus as coming in the flesh. So all 3 of these scriptures all contain the same thing. any person or spirit that does not confess Jesus, Messiah, has come in the flesh is of Antichrist. And a deceiver. So see, I underline these because these are one of the traits of an Antichrist figure. He's a deceiver. He's very eloquent, a great orator. He can deceive. He knows how to plot evil things secretly, and he can manage it all. He's just that way. That's who he is. But these are the only scriptures using Antichrist. There's a few others which may suggest a final Antichrist figure appearing just for Jesus. So let's look at those right now. Just a few others. Paul talks about it in 2 Thessalonians. He says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So these are all traits of the Antichrist: seeking worship, demanding to be worshiped, saying he's God, blaspheming God. But notice here, I've underlined this falling away. There's another sign I didn't put in the 10. The great falling away. This is the big one I'm looking for. Now, a lot of people, and this is what makes prophecy, beloved, so hard, is it looks like the church has been falling away for 20 plus years now, maybe more. Depending on how you look at it, we could say that's been going on for a long time. But the big question is, as for an all-millennial, because as all-millennial, I believe we're already in tribulation. The whole gospel age is tribulation. But I'm one of the all-millennials that do believe right before Jesus comes, there's going to be increased tribulation. How long, we don't know. Some kind of, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a 3.5 year period. But we just don't know. But here's my question as an all-millennial for end times. Not necessarily all these dispensational signs and wars and stuff that they're always looking at and making such a big deal out of. But how long is it going to take for Satan to gather the nations again and come against the church? How long is that going to take? Because in Revelation 20, that tells us, see, he's bound now. How can you say Satan's bound? Because he hasn't brought an end to things yet. That's why Christ came and put some kind of a hindrance on Satan so that the gospel can go forward to the elect throughout this gospel age, and Satan cannot do anything about it. He's helpless in that area. Now, he can do other things, but he can't do anything there. But the question for me is, then, when God gives the nod and says, okay, now I'm taking that restrainer off of you, how long is that going to take Satan to regather all the leaders of all the nations and make them come down on the church and change laws and times, make it illegal, make it just so hard for you? You can't make your faith public at all. That's what it's going to be. How long is that going to take? That's the big question for me. But yeah, Paul calls him the man of sin, and notice he's the son of perdition. You're going to see that a lot because this is associated with the Antichrist. It says even in Daniel over and over. I'll bring that out later. So let's just keep going. There's more of Antichrist in the New Testament. Revelation 13, we're introduced. He says, then I stood on the sand of the sea and I saw a beast. So all of these you see are the Antichrist figure, beast, 6 times in here. He has 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. So we can see that's like these individual characters in Daniel's dream. Remember, he had 4 beasts indicating 4 empires, the same ones as were seen in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, right? Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And this creature, though, is probably that fourth creature, but is it the same? Well, it looks different. We'll kind of get into some more of that in detail at the very end of the program. But he's a composite of all these. Remember, the Grecian one was Persian was the leopard. I'm sorry, the Persians were the bear. The leopard was the Grecian Empire. The lion, Babylon. So this beast here is kind of a composite of all of those that Daniel saw and kind of mixed together. We talked a lot about this, both in this series and in the series of Revelation. But yeah, notice here, the fourth beast in Daniel 7 has 10 horns, of which 3 are plucked up as a little horn emerges. Here, John sees a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So it is a little different, but is it just different because it's grown over these years and it's taken in attributes from all these other fallen kingdoms and kind of assimilated them into its evil nature? We just don't know. It's very mysterious, but here's the rest of that scripture. And he was given a mouth speaking great. These are signs we saw over and over. Great blasphemies. He was given authority to continue 42 months. These are all signs given to the Antichrist. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, and blasphemed his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So this is definitely Antichrist signs attributed to this beast. So yeah, we can kind of put them and the man of sin in the same character because these same signs and same things are there. It's not 100% ironclad, but yeah, we can be pretty safe to assume these are Antichrist figures that may be manifesting in our future as we can keep an eye out for them. Here's Revelation 17. The beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit. And there's that, go into perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. This is that very mysterious passage we tried to decipher in our Revelation 17 program, and I don't think we got through it. I'm still learning now. I'm picking up things on it, and I've learned a lot by studying this preterist view of it, a partial preterist view of it. It's really helped me out a lot because a lot of that happened just the way it said, and beloved, we can't just overlook those things. The beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the 7 and is going into perdition. So there's that again. It's just his destiny. This has all been appointed. There's an appointed time, and this has all been prophesied. It's all just like we went through in Daniel's last week. In Daniel's, the very first prerogative we went through, the principle of God's judgment, measuring precisely when the cup gets full, judgment's poured out after it's measured properly. So, yeah, this makes me feel very comfortable, though. God's got this whole thing under control. This is all part of God's plan, beloved. But yeah, note Daniel. Let's just read Daniel 7:11 real quick through and 26. Daniel 7:11 and 26. Daniel 7:11 says, I watched then because of the sound of the blasphemous words which the horn was speaking. I watched until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning flame. And this is interesting at verse 12. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, and yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So that kind of goes with what I was saying. This beast here has assimilated those previous beasts we saw in Daniel. They were like, they're allowed to continue on only in that other beast, though. Only as they've been assimilated into his evil nature for God's end time appointment, right? Wow. But yeah, this goes right with it. Look at verse 26 here. Well, let's back up to verse 25. Daniel 7:25. He said this, speaking of this Antichrist figure, the beast. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High. These were all signs we saw in our first program. And shall intend to change times and law in his attempt to put an end to sacrifice and offering, right? Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times half a time, which for me, that's the gospel age. It could be speaking of a 3.5-year period at the end of the gospel age. It's up for argument. Verse 26, but the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy him forever. So there's that going into perdition. It's just been prophesied. It's going to happen. This is all part of God's plan. So let's just kind of end with this little mystery here. As if you may not be confused enough as it is. Here is the mind. Okay, wait, look at this title. Do we have 10 kings or 7 kings? In Revelation 17, make up your mind. Is it 10 kings or 7 kings? Well, it's both. And that's something we miss. That's something I've missed a lot in trying to share with you guys and help figure this thing out. And I didn't really get this through my stupid head until about a week ago. But here, look at this. Here's the mind which has wisdom. So again, John is speaking in a way where he says this with the mark of the beast. Here's someone who has wisdom, can figure this out. His name is the name of a man. It's a mark. It's a number of the beast, 666. And he's expecting, look, some of you guys can figure this out, and you'll see it. You'll live to see this Antichrist. You'll be able to figure this out. That's the way because these things cyclically happen to every generation as far as I'm concerned. Now, he said, the mind which has wisdom. Okay, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So this would be Rome. Okay, let's just not beat around the bush. There are also 7 kings. See, we got 7 kings, and we also got 10 kings. All right, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. We went through all that. We've done that. Nero would be the one that would be present at the time of this writing, if you agree with me. If you're a dispensationalist, you're going to say Domitian was in charge, was the emperor at the time of this writing. So backing up to the emperors, you'd have to start in the middle with Galba or something. I mean, you start with this, like, why? Whereas if it's Nero, I can go and plus if I go ahead, if Domitian's one and I go ahead to the 7th, it doesn't line out. The 7th one only is supposed to stay in power for a very short time, and this evil one comes up and plucks him up. And the Bible does tell us that there's going to be this horn coming up and uprooting 3 others, and that we saw that. The Galba, Ortho, and Vitellius or something like that. Those 3, they did not last. Those 3 just were like a 1.5 year period, and they were all gone. It was like a horrible time for the Roman Empire. And so, yes, that does fit with that. But it starts to fall apart after that. We'll go into more of that later, but let me finish reading this and get out of your way here. Okay, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. Okay? The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th. So the beast himself is the Antichrist figure. The beast himself is the Antichrist, right? Not one of the heads. And is of the 7, and he's going into perdition. So, that's that Antichrist that we saw that's been appointed to him. And it's always linked to him. Now, look here. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as of yet. but they will receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So if we're talking about the preterist view here, and I need to get and study some more videos and get in touch with some preterist people, I guess. How do you explain this? Because they've received no kingdom. As the time of writing, when this was written, there was no kingdom. If I'm a dispensationalist, let's say, and I'm writing under the dominion of Domitian while he's reigning, then that one who comes after him, none of that stuff fits. There were no three uprooted. None of it fits that scenario. None of them went into perdition. The 10 kings, look down here, the 10 kings had no kingdom in the days of John's vision and seemed to be set for a future fulfillment. So this is highly possible, unless this can be explained by the preterists better than what I've seen so far. It's highly possible that these 10 kings indeed are unique to the final manifestation of this Antichrist figure. That's a safe assumption, I think, for all believers. So let's just wrap this up with a few things that I'd like to leave you with thinking about. Daniel was told Daniel was told the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. That was in Daniel 12:9. But John, who wrote Revelation, he was told, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. So that tells us, beloved, this is why it's so important to know and understand Daniel very well before you go into reading the book of Revelation. Ezekiel and Zechariah and would also help, but Daniel's the big one. Jesus even refers to Daniel when he's talking about the end times and this Antichrist figure in Matthew 24. So yeah, Daniel's a big one. And as you can see, Daniel didn't have all of the revelation that he'd liked to have gotten because it wasn't time yet. Now they've reached the end of times. Beloved, they've been saying, the church been saying we're in the last days since right after Jesus ascended. So as soon as the new covenant was ushered in, that began the last days. So we're in the last period of time right now. But yeah, and that tells us how these Daniel creatures were kind of assimilated into one big bad fourth creature, actually a fifth creature, who had the 10 horns, but after it's all done, there's really only 8 horns because he uprooted 3 and he is the 8th. So there's 8 horns now, right? And maybe that's what we should be looking for today. Maybe it's ultimately not going to be 10 kings, and maybe it's going to be 8. I don't know. But these are all questions that need to be answered, right? Let's look at number 2. A mysterious 11th sign gives us even more information not previously mentioned in our study, and that would be the great falling away. I know a lot of you people who are dispensational have different views about the falling away. It's confusing. What is meant by this is the entire church. I mean, you could say the Reformation, leaving the Catholic Church was a falling away. Or you could say the Catholic Church formation and the papacy itself was a falling away and departure from the true faith. I mean, there's so many things that throughout history that we can look at and call an apostasy or a departure from the faith. But this changing laws and times and things, that's a big one because we're seeing laws change now. And I don't think it's necessarily just related only to sacrifice and offerings to keep people from worshiping God. You can't legally worship God. Number 3, when a prophecy has been fulfilled, we should be very careful claiming a double reference fulfillment. Beloved, just be careful. I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but when I was preaching and teaching dispensationalism as a pastor, I would do that very thing. I would put a double reference on all kinds of prophecies without even thinking about it. But beloved, as I've been studying these, and I'm seeing the detail in Daniel chapter 11 about these kings of the north and kings of the south and all these post-Alexander skirmishes that went on, and the detail of prophesying the events in their life and the battles and all the things that unfolded in history it's unreal. It is unreal. It's just so detailed. I'll tell you, you need to be really careful when if you're gonna add more stuff to it. Say, well, that wasn't the exact fulfillment. There's more to come. Well, you need to be really careful, beloved. But number 4, there's a definite pattern of Antichrist figures emerging in the world, suggesting an eventual consummation manifesting in a single individual. So even as an all-millennial, it's not crazy for me to be looking for a modern day Antichrist figure. Now, that's probably because I'm an idealist all-millennial, not a partial preterist all-millennial, although I do believe in some preterism, but probably not as to the degree where I could call myself a real honest-to-God partial preterist. I don't know, the descriptions of these eschatological views vary so much. It's hard to really pin them down sometimes. But we need to be careful with that very thing. A lot of this stuff's already been fulfilled, and God is telling us, yes, some of it is microcosms. Yes, it gives us an idea of what could happen in the future. Definitely, yes, I believe that. Number 5, the mysterious passages all seem to point to the here and now. I don't remember which program it was where I said that, but it's kind of somewhat of a revelation to me. As we begin to get to these scriptures, like in Daniel 12 and all these others that seem to not be connected with the context, suddenly we're talking about something that seems to be different, and maybe a different time somehow mysteriously has just changed. Those always seem to be what we're looking for today. They always seem to be that here and now thing that we can't put our finger on. And that's how the book of Revelation is. It's a living book, and that's why it's pertinent to every generation, and has been for all of time. So that's just the way that one is. Finally, number 6, all the prophetic images in Daniel can be seen as fulfilled with the exception of chapter 12, leaving a possible manifestation in our time. So, yes, Daniel 9, 70 weeks has been fulfilled. Yes, Daniel 8 has been fulfilled. Yes, Daniel 11 has been fulfilled. Yes, Daniel 2 has been fulfilled. Yes, Daniel 7 has been fulfilled. It all happened. All those kingdoms came and all those kings. Now, there's some mysteries that we may be able to apply and put a double application to in those texts, and we've seen them, and I've done my best to try to bring them out. But beloved, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't be so, as when I was a dispensationalist, I was so closed-minded, zoomed in to the scriptures where I couldn't see the big picture. I was so zoomed in that I had my bullet points, and everything I'm reading had to fit into those bullet points instead of me reading without bullet points and letting the scripture inform me as to what its original intent was. Well, beloved, I guess that's all we're going to do on this. We're going to start with a new series. I'll try to get to one next week, but I'm not going to bore you with how busy I am here. So much going on. I'm trying to get retired. When I do, I'm kind of partially retired now, but when I do get retired, I'll be able to dedicate my full time to this and do a better job of teaching you guys and informing you to the best of my ability of not only the all-millennial view, but of all eschatological views and other doctrines as well. That's what we like to do here at Living Stones University. Love you guys. Thanks again for subscribing. Be salt and be light.